Now, since the Labour Party conference in February, Environment Minister Alan Kelly has been promising the introduction of rent certainty. He said then, what we're looking at is a process whereby people have some certainty as regards rent into the future while housing supply is being dealt with. The Minister said this was his #1 priority, and he said, I'm committing here that I am intent on entering the market to change this. It has to be done. Now, you disagree. You have said it is clear that interference in the market to its detriment is not something we should do. While people are calling for what they call clarity on rent certainty, if we interfere in the wrong way, we will make matters worse. It's little wonder, Taoiseach, that there's chaos in your cabinet. Alan Kelly has referred to his Fine Gael colleagues as anonymous cards because they briefed against the rent certainty proposal. But the chaos in the cabinet is of nothing compared to the instability and the chaos inflicted by you on families who cannot afford to pay rents. And yesterday, when I raised this issue, you said the Minister for Finance and the Minister for the Environment would this week conclude discussions on proposals to deal with the housing crisis. So could you confirm for the Dáil today, and for those citizens out there who are suffering directly as a result of your policies, that the Government will introduce rent certainty? Will you tell us that today? And if not, will you tell us why not?
Well, I've said repeatedly to you, Deputy Adams, that the Government are not going to do anything that would make the situation worse. Now, in respect of the construction sector, which collapsed completely under the previous administration, coming from a very, very low base to resurrect this. And it applies across a number of different areas. There are those who are rough sleepers in this city. I listened to a very effective and very efficient official this morning speaking about what's happening here in this city and the efforts that have been made, which are proving to be very successful to deal with that particular problem, even though the population of those who are rough sleepers has changed over the past period. There is the progress that has been made clearly with over 700 families now put into what were voided units, or units that had to be reconstructed, renovated and made habitable. You have the changes in the housing assistance programme, which provides a degree of certainty and further option for those tenants who are under pressure with landlords. You have the $4 billion on the table between here and 2020, objectives and targets set for every local authority, chief executives called together by the Minister for the Environment and said, get on with your job, which is to provide these houses for which the taxpayer is providing money. And the other issues in respect of the private housing sector, because clearly with every new facility that comes into the country with direct investment or expansion of employment, there's a need for further accommodation. And this is stalled effectively because of the situation that applied, either because of a shortage of access to equity, the planning situation, the building regulations, and these are all matters that are the source of discussion between the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Health, or the Minister for Finance. I've already made the point that the Minister for the Environment and his officials have done an extraordinary amount of work in the areas that I've mentioned. And I do hope that the discussions that are taking place between the two ministers can conclude this week with an agreement on how you can make effective response in the short term on some things that need to be done, and clearly in the medium to longer term to allow for a situation where viability will apply in terms of the supply of houses, which is the critical fault in all of this. If you don't have the supply of houses, you have extra pressure on existing accommodation units. I was referred yesterday to the decision to provide modular units, and the first tenders for those are now being put in place, and a small number of over 20 will be provided by Christmas. So it's a challenging situation, Deputy, and I do hope that the discussions that are taking place will conclude this week so that we can move on here and deal with the issues that will allow for accommodation to be provided for individuals and for families with children, that they can have an opportunity to have proper, comfortable accommodation with a longer-term view for the future.
Deputy Adams, 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Taoiseach, I asked you a very direct question. Will the government introduce rent certainty? And if not, why not? You never answered the question. You totally avoided the question. Now, contrary to your protestations, you are making the lives of citizens worse. Your policies are making the lives of citizens worse. You're allowing the market to decide on this issue. Since you took office, rents have increased by 35%. 90% of these cases are above rent supplement limits. So families can't afford to live in a home. They're being evicted, they're being forced from their homes and into emergency accommodation. There are now 1,500 children living in homelessness accommodation in this city as a result of your policy. No other reason for it whatsoever. And the response of your government has been incoherent, incohesive and chaotic, with ministers briefing against each other instead of dealing with the housing crisis.
Thank you.
Now, you have said that the next election is a choice between stability and chaos. What stability is there for these families? The minister promised rent certainty. Fine Gael is resisting this. 24 Fine Gael Oireachtas members are landlords.
Sorry, Deputy, would you please put your question? Thank you.
So will the government deliver rent certainty? Will it be Labour's way, or will it be Fine Gael's way?
Well, it won't be Sinn Féin's way. It won't be Sinn Féin's way. If you want to drive down disposable income, increase taxes, drive jobs out of the country, that's the Sinn Féin way. It won't be Sinn Féin's way. It won't be Sinn Féin's way. Now, what I said in answer to your question, the very first thing I said was the government are not going to do anything that will make this situation worse. And the fundamental issue that you have to deal with is supply measures for houses. This man's party destroyed our economy, destroyed it. And the entire construction sector collapsed with the loss of 100,000 jobs. We now have to rebuild that along with every other sector of the country. And as I pointed out to you, in terms of rough sleepers, of homeless people, changes in the housing assistance programme, the modular units, the social housing, all of these are being put in place, including the return to habitable status of voided units, as they're called. The issue here, in respect of families that are being put out because of increased pressures in terms of rent, are a point of discussion now between the two ministers. The Minister for the Environment has introduced and changed the rules in respect of housing assistance programmes, and that allows so many more to be accommodated by the Department of Social Protection on a case-by-case basis, and I'm sure that you welcome that. So we've got to deal now. We've got to deal on the one hand with the supply side, on the other in respect of what changes can be made that will make an impact now, immediately, and for the immediate and longer term. And that's the point of discussion that's taking place between the two ministers. I hope they can conclude it this week, but it will not be Sinn Féin's way. You would destroy this economy and drive hundreds of thousands of jobs out of the place.
Thank you. Deputy Mick Wallace, thank you.
Thank you, Concordia. Taoiseach, you say that you're not making the last